Hi, everyone. My name is Marissa Trew. I'm the Senior Content Lead at Blockhouse. And with me, we have Mark Soares, who's the founder of Blockhouse, and Diane Drubay, who is Art and Culture at Tezos Connect. Sorry. So for today's session, we're going to be discussing the Web3 Toolkit, which is buy, sell, and display. And if you joined us earlier, we actually hashed over the definition of Web3, but for those of you that are new here, we're going to revisit that question again because it is such a broad one. So Mark, once again, can you just give us a general rundown of what Web3 means to you?
Sure. So Web3, first and foremost, the term is not as significant as the technology, right? So don't get stuck on the term itself. Some people are calling it Web 5, Web 6 as a kind of a joke, but Web 3, what it means is a transformation from Web 2, which is the current state of the internet and web. And if you look at the beginnings of the internet, if from a content standpoint or a creative standpoint, whereas Web 1 was where users consumed content, Web 2, where we are now, where users create also content, Web 3 is a shift where users can own content. So that's a very simplistic view, and I should also qualify it as it's a fluid concept. It's still being developed. So I think in general, it's transformation of consuming content, creating content on social media and other platforms to finally being able to truly own content and engage directly with each other and your fans.
And Diane, thank you for dialing in. I want to ask what Web3 means to you as it pertains to the art world specifically. What does Web3 mean for the art world?
Yeah, well, I fully agree with what Mark explained, but indeed, because I'm an artist and because I'm coming from the art world and because I'm taking care of art and culture at Tezos Connect, to my mind, it's like reshuffling the pyramid scheme of the traditional art market. It's about giving more power to artists, communities, and collectors. It's about creating a new space, offering new social models where artists and the art can be actually at the heart of everything. In the Web3 art space, we actually see that artists are shaping their own space. They are even building their own space from scratch if they need. They don't hesitate to be loud. They don't hesitate to coordinate and to govern collectively. It's definitely a collective movement going into new directions, I would say.
So given art as an industry has stood the test of time, it's been around for centuries, if not millennia, why is the growth of Web3 so fundamental to the evolution of this industry? Diane, would you like to share?
Yeah. So what we start to see in Web3 is that artist communities and artist collectives are really playing a key role in this new world. As I said, they are really at the center of it. And if they decide to join forces and say something loud, they will say it, they will dare saying it, they will dare joining forces, they will dare reshaping things, and they will be heard and they will be supported. So it's basically, that's also why we have so many engaged artists on the Tezos community. It's a space where you can have a voice, and also because on Tezos we have very low barrier, really low barriers. Everyone can have a voice and everyone can have a say. So many voices were unheard before, and we're not really playing a role in the art market and in the traditional art world. Why now they can have access to it? They can produce, they can mint, they can collect, and they can be part of this art world, which was totally excluding them before. We need really to understand that the art market was highly exclusive, mostly for a certain kind of people from one part of the planet. Now we can see that everyone has a place and everyone has a voice, and it's really about breaking this barrier.
Mark, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, it's a little bit more anecdotal, but I'm just excited because people that I know that have never collected art are all of a sudden collecting art, which is really cool, right? So it's much more accessible. When when your family and friends start saying, hey, I collected this cool NFT and it's from this artist that I follow on Twitter, you know, it kind of brings the point home that the accessibility is now there. And I think it's a really good thing to onboard a new generation of collectors. And it means that it's accessible enough. And certainly there's ways to make it even more accessible, but it's getting there. So I think that's a really big shift that Web3 and blockchain are activating.
So essentially, we're dropping the barrier to entry for creators. So we're actually allowing more artists of any level, of any discipline, to enter this space and start to profile their own work and generate an audience for their work and have it appreciated. At the same time, we're also creating almost a new breed of collectors because people are becoming more enthusiastic about this space, and there's a new way to consume and to purchase and to collect art. But then the way we consume art, especially from an industry perspective or an institutional perspective, is inevitably going to change. So a large amount or a large volume of work that exists as NFTs on Tezos are digital works. We have generative pieces. We have, pixel art. We have very much digitally native pieces. So the way we display them are a little bit different to the way we might display a photo or a painting or a sculpture. How is that going to change with the onset of Web3? Diane?
Yeah, so how exhibiting and interacting with these new art pieces is actually changing. Is that your question?
Yeah, essentially, how will we change the way we actually exhibit art as this space rises?
So what I see, and especially for the past 3-4 months, is so many artists actually trying to break the borders, the frontiers between in real life, virtual, and on-chain. And they are basically trying to challenge and revisit this new space, which is in between these three spaces. I see so many artists already looking at ways to connect these three spaces using data-driven interactive art installations, using sensors or using real life live data to create on-chain art, or even using different kind of new generative art, new generative technology, and it's what you actually experience in the Tezos booth at Art Basel. So I see a lot of artists already actually exploring how they can really challenge these different places and the different spaces, and how we can start to interact and also act on what will be minted.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's interesting to see how, first of all, we're still really early, right? Because it's new technology. This displaying of digital art, there's a nuance to it that, for example, if you visit the Tezos space, you'll notice the way we're displaying the work. It's either through projection or through well-curated displays. Because you have to pay respect to the art. You can't be distracted by the hardware. That's I think one of the things that still needs a lot of work is hardware options to display these beautiful NFTs. I think that will come soon enough. But in terms of the Web3 in-person experience, it feels that it's becoming much more interactive. There's, a component where if you do take one action, you receive something digital, like, again, in the Tezos activation, if you take one action, you can actually generate an NFT and it gets sent to your wallet automatically. But you could say the same thing with proof of attendance tokens, which are becoming more and more popular. And that's just a token that says you were there at this moment in time. But all of this is important because it helps build a stronger user experience. Now, it's not without its wrinkles. Like if you look at how e-commerce in general has evolved, you still can't go to a store and buy on your phone and just take the stuff off the shelf and walk home with it. Like there's a little bit of a correlation there. There's always wrinkles that you need to smooth out in the process. That will come with time. But I think we're getting to the point of it's about interacting, it's about receiving something on site, and critically, I think it's going to be important to really pay respect to the artwork, the way it's displayed, the way it's projected. And I think with each event, like Art Basel, you're going to see a stronger presence of digital art, and I personally look forward to it.
So then on an institutional level, how do you see various players responding to the onset of Web3? Do you believe that they're very hesitant? Do you believe they're still a little too skeptical? Or are you finding that there's an appetite to engage with this kind of technology? Diane?
Well, we're actually running a long program since December here at TZ Connect and for the global Tezos Ecosystem at large, which is called Web3 for the Art and Culture, WAC. And every Wednesday for 25 weeks, we finished this week. We actually met for 1 hour with museum professionals, with curators, with artists, trying to understand what are the main issues, concerns, questions, criticism, ideas, challenges. And we've been documenting all these interactions and all these insights into a series of 25 Medium articles. And basically, the main struggle is really the lack of knowledge and the fact that the media are mostly talking about one story, one big story, which is about the heat cell, which is about new source of revenues, and not really expressing other alternatives. Also talking a lot about the ecological footprint without really explaining what it means and how we also have other alternatives which are much more green and respectful of the planet. So I believe the first concern is really the lack of knowledge. And then, to be honest, most of the time they have other priorities. Not every museum should start thinking about Web3 when they're about to close. We are still in a crisis. So Web3 is definitely good if there is a need, if it can actually fill a need, which was already here before being interested by Web3. And that's something that we are also exploring in our fellowship program, which is called WAC Fellowship. We basically have 8 museums and digital art festivals working with us and exploring how they can use Web3 to really support them, to really support their own mission and really fit one of their needs. So for instance, and also just saying, most of the time also, it's definitely easier when the museum is having innovation and experimentation in their DNA, because they're there testing, they're there exploring and experimenting. And that's why part of the fellowship, we have Light Art Space Foundation, the Next Museum, the Van Gogh Museum, and many others, because naturally they are attracted by these experimentations. But again, we are totally at the beginning, we are still exploring, and we should understand that it might be not a good fit for every museums. And that's also something that we are trying to understand. What is the scope?
I mean, I think that's a very important point, that not everyone is necessarily prepared at this point in time, but the education factor is a major hurdle that we need to overcome, because like we all said multiple times throughout this conversation, this is very much a new technology. There's a lot of learning to be done, and there's still a lot of building to be done at the same time. So to assume the readiness across the board isn't a good starting point. But that's actually also why we're here today, to discuss this Web3 toolkit, right? Those that are perhaps ready or have this innovation built into their DNA, as you mentioned, may just need a few of tools to kind of ease their journey along the way. So let's dig into a few of those. If we think about what tools are available to art institutions, we've just covered WAC. What other kind of pay-to-play turnkey solutions are there that gallerists, exhibitions, museums, curators can actually use to start engaging more readily in this space? Mark?
Well, I think you're seeing it's starting to become more common for institutions to embrace Web3 and NFTs. Certainly they were not the first movers, and that's fine. I think that's actually a good thing. Skepticism is healthy. I think humans in general are skeptic by nature, so it's not a problem. But there's a couple of tools that will help institutions greatly. Number one is white label marketplaces. So right now there's a few marketplaces that are prevalent and they have a lot of users, but they don't offer a lot of options for customizing. And the thing with institutions and galleries is they're about the experience, and they're about the brand, and they're about the curation. So the space where the work lives is paramount, right? Because you're trying to create and curate an experience for the user and for the collector. So in that sense, turnkey solutions that allow an institution to basically mint NFTs, create galleries on their site, and sell NFTs to collectors directly is really important. It's almost, think of it as the decentralization of the NFT marketplaces, which almost has to happen because the curation and the branding is so important to these institutions. So there's a couple of teams working on Tezos that actually have bespoke marketplaces. They're basically turnkey. An example is a team called Interpop that did the drop with, this is not relating to art, but it gives you an example with the Gap, the clothing brand, and they curated this experience for their users where basically they can mint the NFTs and you can collect, and it's fairly turnkey. So that's one example. There's a few others that are fully turnkey. They'll collect payment in crypto or credit card. They'll handle all the taxes and regulation, et cetera. So an institution can be onboarded very quickly, and just they have to only worry about what does their brand look like, what is the content that they want to mint as an NFT, really the things that they're very good at. They can focus on that. They don't have to focus on building a platform, which can be quite daunting. Not every institution wants to go out and build the next OpenSea. It's a fairly daunting task, but there are tools out there that you can just take, repackage, and be live very quickly and offer the users or the collectors a great experience. So that's number one. Number two is a tool that allows people to interact on site. That's really important. It could be done a couple of different ways, through proof of attendance token, for example, or like we do it in the Tezos activation, which I recommend everyone check out, where by taking a certain action, you can receive an NFT as a gift. We created, at Blockhouse, we created this tool called Suvi, which is short for souvenir. And really all it enables is the collection of an NFT after an interaction with a touch point in a physical space. And it's very easy to do. It enables creation of a wallet in 2 clicks. This is done through a really powerful social login tool through a wallet called Kukai on Tezos. And using that mechanism, you can essentially onboard anybody with 2 clicks. Doing that enables you to reward them for being there. Now, the reason why that's important for institutions is you have physical spaces, you're doing exhibits and showing the work in a physical space. A year from now, if you're going to host a collection from those artists, you can reward those who attended previous events because you'll know that they attended because they have the reward that you gave them, right? You know that they have the NFT, you know that they have the proof of attendance token because their wallet will still have it. So being able to reward the users either by unlocking experiences in the future or on site is important, but it requires these tools that allow any user to create a wallet, receive an NFT as frictionlessly as possible. And that's one of the other tools that we built. So those 2 components I think are critical. And
are these tools readily available today?
Yes, so the tool for rewarding people on site that we call Suvi, that's available right now. We've deployed it at every Art Basel event since December, and also a few other art events and cultural events. And the white label solution for marketplaces, there's a couple of options on Tezos. I'm happy to facilitate connections if necessary, as I'm sure Diane is also able to facilitate if there's any questions. But yeah, those are available as well, and the teams are eager to work with other institutions who want to do this.
And Diane, from the arts perspective, what do the readily made, ready-to-use tools look like for artists in particular?
for artists, well, they can use beautiful tools on FXH, for instance, and yeah, others. Tools available, it's not, I can't really think about others, to be honest. I was mostly focusing on institutions currently. And actually, I would like to add on top of what Mark said. We have, among the WAC program, we have a hackathon actually running until next week. And we have 5 bounties for a total of 50K. And these 5 bounties will be actually will actually provide these kind of tools that museums and artists are looking for. So we have one bounty, which is about setting up some interactive NFT installation packages for cultural institutions. So basically something similar to Suvi, but with more complex interaction and the possibility to create a generative art, which will be minted automatically. We have also one bounty, which is about reflecting on the real world in art NFT. So that's something that I was referring to previously, basically being able to capture data from the weather, for instance, or numbers of visitors in the museum space, or numbers of visitors interacting with the artwork, and then having automatically some NFTs being generated and being minted. So it's really allowing the visitor to become the actor, or allowing also data from real life to interact and to intervene in the artwork. We also have one bounty which is about user-friendly NFT ticketing for museums. We have so many museums are asking these questions. Questions about curation DAO as well, allowing one space or one exhibition of the museum being curated, co-curated by the community. That's also a challenge that museums are looking at. And then how to better create a Web3 community outreach program for cultural institutions. And this is all about, the next step of loyalty programs. And again, proof of attendance is definitely one of them, but I believe you can go way further and basically provide more utility to this token, provide some shared governance, shared curation, as we said before, etc. So this hackathon will actually end next week. And at the end, we will have 11 prizes, so 11 teams who will receive funds to finalize what they have done. And because everything is open source on Tezos, everything will be available to be used by museums or artists afterwards as well.
So what's great is that there's such an active and concerted effort to find out what questions are being asked and actually develop direct solutions to those questions. And I think that's actually going to enable the growth of this industry at a pace that I think will only get faster. But then as we look at these tools, how do you actually see the differentiation between what tools are better positioned to help the artists versus better able to help the institutions?
So I think, sorry, my throat is tickling a little bit. There's a few tools that are really helpful for onboarding artists as well. We currently have on the Tezos platform, which is the one I'm most familiar with, Object.com and FXH, 2 marketplaces, one of which is for art in general. It's a little bit more, less category specific. And FXH, which is this tremendous platform, it's actually the #1 generative art platform out there. So if you're a generative artist, you have to check it out. FXH allows artists to upload their algorithms, and this enables collectors to collect artwork that is created at the point of purchase. It actually takes a bit of information from the collector, meaning the wallet address, and then it generates the artwork. It's fantastic. It's one of those things that we're seeing a lot of momentum. Just like last year, we were seeing a lot of momentum for NFTs. Generative art, we're seeing the same exact momentum grow. So those tools, if you're an artist, you want to check them out. Now, those are our marketplaces. If you want to further decentralize, just like we were talking about institutions and white label marketplace solutions for institutions, there's another layer that you can go further for artists. we're actually incubating a product at Blockhouse called Minterpress, which is a plugin for WordPress. We're trying to make it as easy as possible for any artist to launch a gallery and mint straight from their WordPress site. So that plugin will go live very shortly. But this is the kind of tool that enables artists who may not be savvy in terms of development to create a gallery on their site, mint NFTs straight from it, and then allow people to collect it. And I think that's important. That's one piece of the puzzle that's still missing that will help further decentralize the act of buying and collecting NFTs from just any website. So.
And I think that will also help in terms of building the bridge from Web 2 to Web 3 in allowing essentially plugins and tools to exist on Web 2 software that kind of helps people jump across or like take the leap for themselves. So then if we look at the Tezos exhibition that's here today at Art Basel and you walk us through it, what are some of the platforms that we're interacting with that you've already mentioned so far?
Well, so you have three key platforms that are being leveraged. Number one, FXHash is driving the mechanism for the interaction. That's in collaboration with the Suvi application. So when you walk in, you'll see QR codes that you can scan. Scanning the QR code prompts the creation of a wallet. The creation of the wallet triggers this domino effect with FXHash, the marketplace, which unlocks effectively the creation of an NFT by one of 4 artists. So we collaborated with these 4 amazing artists, Alexandra Jovanik, Semtau, Echo33, and Ryan Bell, who are all artists that are minting on Tezos and who also mint on FXHash. And they created these collections of 1,200 NFTs or algorithm that can generate 1,200 NFTs. And they're gifting 1,000 of those to participants who attend the event. So what's actually happening is Suvi, the application, allows people to interact by creating the wallet. The wallet then triggers FXHash to initiate the process of minting an NFT from one of these artists, which then gets sent to the wallet. FXHash is a marketplace, but it's also a tool. So that's number one. And those two tools are working together. And then you, of course, have Object.com, which is a marketplace where Herbert Frank, the pioneer of generative art, decided to mint an iconic piece as an NFT. And this is the Mondrian piece that he created in 1979, which I really encourage everyone to check it out after the talk. It's on display, projected into space. And so Object.com was the platform of choice for Herbert Frank to actually mint. Currently it's not for sale, but I think you can make an offer on the piece. And Object.com is a very popular option for artists to list their work and collect work, and it's just, and it covers a lot of different categories. So those are the components that are being used within the Tezos activation.
And Diane, when it comes to the WAC Hackathon, you identified 5 key questions or key problem statements that you want participants to address and to build for. But what are some of the broader, I guess, problems that these tools will eventually need to address? Because this is just the starting point.
Broader, I think more than talking about problems, because I believe the problems will come when we will start experimenting and exploring and using. I can tell you about what museums and institutions are looking for and the different ways they can actually interact with Web3, because it's very different from the way artists are interacting. First of all, collecting new art form, crypto art, blockchain, on-chain art is a new art form, exactly like net art or digital art. So museums are collecting crypto art. They're also collecting artworks which makes history. So the historical iconic pieces, the one by Herbert Frank, I'm sure, I hope, will become an historic piece, iconic piece, and hopefully maybe it will be collected by a big collector, by a big museum, and will be exhibited in different places. As I said, they are also very much interested by NFT ticketing, so how to build up a new community, a new loyalty program using tickets, and really how to better engage with the community, give them more possibilities to be, to exist, to act within the institution space and within the institution program. I already mentioned interactivity, how you can actually create some augmented visitor journey and visitor experience as well. So this is also key. A lot of museums are experimenting with immersive exhibitions, but then if you can imagine an exhibition which will be immersive, but also which will change depending on the way you act or on the way the other are acting, and then this being minted and being collected, you really go through different spaces and different universes in one in one journey. Also, museums and collectors are talking about how you can acquire a new artwork, this kind of beautiful, iconic piece, but how you can acquire it by a community. How a community can buy all together one artwork and then lend it to a museum for a long period of time. That's also something that a lot of people are talking about. So really giving the ownership and the collection power to collectors and to individuals. Also, museums and institutions are talking about how they can co-own artworks. So buying together an artwork and then being able to display it in different places at the same time or not, because obviously digital art can be fractionalized and used by different owners. These are a few things. I can go way deeper and I can give you a longer list, but I think these are the next big steps that museums, institutions, and galleries and art fairs are about to take, or are already starting to take.
And with these tools very quickly becoming available to art institutions, how is their overall role in the art space going to change with these new tools at hand? Well,
what I love in Web3 is that we really see new rules and new roles, meaning that if we list artists, collectors, curators, and exhibition places, we have 4 roles that are actually now leading the market, the art market. Museums is actually an exhibition place, exactly like galleries, but galleries are also doing other things, and museums are also curating and preserving. So the roles and the rules and the behaviors are all being shifted and mixed in a way. So definitely, I believe that they are starting to have a new kind of role in these art markets. The way they can collect and the way they can interact with artists will be way more supportive, will be also way more, it's about collaborating. This morning, Christina Leopold from Light Art Space Foundation was basically explaining that each time they interact with an artist, they actually collaborate, they commission an artwork which will work in one space, and they think together how to make it better. And the next exhibition that they're working on is all about this collaboration and this co-creation. So yeah, again, the role of the institution is definitely changing. Not so sure I'm fully replying to your question though.
Hey Mark, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah. Definitely. I think that in the topic of collaboration, so there's a lot of experimentation that's happening in Web3 and blockchain in general and NFTs. And I think it would make sense for institutions to start looking at what's working and what's not, but also take a little bit of risk and experiment on their side. One of the most popular recent experiments was exactly that. It was a collaboration on FX Hash between 2 different artists that co-created generative work, and it was fantastic. So when you start to look at what really excites collectors, you have to look at these experiments because they really are grabbing a lot of attention, at least in this new category. And there's nothing stopping institutions from doing that and learning from it as well, and then scaling accordingly. I do think So slightly off topic, but I think that one of the challenges that institutions have, this is across the board, is in the displaying of the NFTs. I think there's still some technological gaps that will need to be overcome in order to provide a really curated space where the NFTs are displayed that people feel is institutional and appropriate for the collection. And I'm directly referring to how they're displayed on a screen, projected, et cetera. That ends up being quite important because a lot of people are desensitized to looking at a TV screen, right? So you're fighting that. You're already battling an education, or you're trying to provide education on what is an NFT, what is the uniqueness of this digital item, but you're also battling this desensitization of a monitor or a TV screen, and you have to address that. If you're creating a curated experience, which is exactly one of the challenges we had in the Tezos activation, was to create something that really feels appropriate and respectful to the artwork so people don't get distracted by other things. That gap, I know, is very specific, but I think it's important because next year at our Basel, you may see quite a few screens, right? And they better be beautiful screens so they don't distract you from the art. And I think that needs to be addressed.
So it's basically granting the artwork as much justice as possible to shine in their best light.
Yeah.
But then we've covered a fair few tools throughout this conversation, but knowing how to use those tools is a whole other matter. So what should institutions actually keep in mind when they start using these tools? Diane?
Yeah, very good question. That we are still learning, that everyone is still learning. I would advise all artists to check the vertical crypto art residency, or maybe apply to join it, and institutions. So we have the WAC Fellowship. We will have a second cohort starting hopefully in October or September. And like this time we had 8 institutions, maybe we will have more in autumn, but that's definitely, yeah, we are still learning. We are still experimenting and exploring. So we need to discuss, we need to meet. Having these 25 online sessions were amazing because people learn with each other. And it was not, having one teacher, giving one unique solution, because there is none really. We are just still really exploring it. So yeah, definitely testing it, going step by step, being aware that we are not in a unicorn or rainbow world, like Mimu said in the previous session. We are still exploring, and definitely we need to go step by step. It's not because you try one thing that it will be a huge success. Far from that. You might fail, you might have a lot of difficulties, you might not reach what you were looking for, and that's totally fine. Like, it's already a success because you did it. You did the first step. The next museum is minting. Next museum is a museum in Amsterdam. They are minting their first NFTs this week, or maybe they already did it. And they go really step by step, and they always also have a proof of attendance in their exhibition, and they have a long plan, like step by step. And then in September, and then next year, they have their strategy to actually explore Web3 is really humble. And it is really not about pushing or expecting too much, but about learning constantly and really enjoying the ride. And that's also something that artists are already doing on Tezos really well, and institutions should start learning step by step.
So essentially being open to experimentation, but also understanding that this is a constant iterative process, and that these institutions have equal part to play in participating in the discussion to shape these solutions in a way that actually truly does fit their needs. Mark, is there anything you'd like to add?
I mean, I think that's it perfectly encapsulates it. Experimentation is good, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It's okay to make mistakes because it's evolving very quickly. I guess what I would add to it is, it's okay to start now without architecting this very elaborate roadmap. I feel like a lot of people have they hesitate to enter this discussion because they feel that there's a burden of creating or architecting this very complex roadmap. And that's not necessarily the case. Like, you don't have to do that. What you may be missing out if you don't start even just experimenting is, for example, if institutions were providing a proof of attendance token to attendees today, which is fairly trivial to do, it's quite easy, and there's no burden of maintenance. In 10 years, if you are having an exhibit of the same artist, for example, you could reward those who were there 10 years before. But you can't do that unless you give them the proof of attendance token. So think of it as a marker in time that you can go back to and re-engage this audience. That's the only thing that gives me a slight anxiety of the opportunities that are missed 10 years from now from not doing it, from doing this very basic step of at least providing proof of attendance token. With NFTs, you could do the same. You could do something like we're doing here in the Tezos space. And it doesn't have to be that elaborate. It doesn't have to be generative art. You could provide NFTs just as a gift. But once you engage on the blockchain, then you could always re-engage. And that's a powerful mechanism. And that's something that, if you're going to experiment, don't feel like you have to over-architect it, but don't feel like I guess I would just say experiment a little bit, because it will pay off in terms of engagement later on, and you'll feel good that you're able to reward those who were there when you started.
So basically, you don't need a full-fledged game plan to get started. You just need to understand whether it's going to offer you any utility at some stage in the future and set yourself a baseline by starting to use these tools. In
certain aspects, that's the case. Of course, you shouldn't go out and do an NFT drop and promise all these things, and like that, you shouldn't do that. But if somebody is attending an exhibit, a proof of attendance token is so useful. There's no burden. It's really just rewarding the user with this marker that you were here at this point in time, you attend this exhibit, and so if we do this exhibit 5 years from now, or we curate something that's relevant to this, you can connect the dots. So it's almost like you got a time machine back to the point when you reward the user, and that's really powerful. I mean, in some ways, it's kind of like, I hate to use this example, but advertising analytics, where you can target users that way. It's not apples to apples, but it reminds me of that, and that you can always reward and reach out to that user and say, hey, you were here at this point in time, and because of that, maybe you can access the VIP hours of this event. And wouldn't that be wonderful to be able to reward the loyal attendees to certain events?
So in that, it's sort of having an idea of what kind of experience you want to deliver and how these tools can enable that without kind of over-promising, as you said.
Right, yeah.
So we've got 2 minutes left on the clock. One question I did want to position is, are there any no-nos that institutions need to be aware of? Just straight off, it's a bad idea. Anything you'd warn institutions off of? I would say, actually, this is one of them. Don't go in entirely blind with and overpromise, the world to your loyal audience members. What else is there that people should be very cautious of when entering the space?
Well, I will say, care for what you have. I actually started to see a lot of institutions giving away what is actually the most precious to them, which is their collection. So, yeah, try to care for what you have and really balance if it's really needed. Sometimes it's not needed to actually turn an exhibition or turn a collection into NFTs. Try to balance the cost and the benefit that you can get from it. Trying to run is totally not a good idea either. But starting step by step, definitely good. And just, I don't know, don't believe in unicorns, all these big heat cells, they are unicorns, and it's not for most institutions, and it's not for most people. And we are starting also to understand what is in the back of all these heat cells. So no need to try, no need to think that this will actually happen to you. It might, but don't need to try to actually reach it. it might happen organically and naturally, but you just need to do the first step.
Mark, any wise words to end us?
I guess I would have to, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, like, in terms of no-nos, the three things that have always been brought up from artists and institutions and brands have always been consistent. Number one, energy efficiency or carbon footprint. Because what we're talking about here is scaling the experience to a lot more users, right? Through institutions, and that becomes, that matters. So if the platform you use does use a lot of energy, that's going to have repercussions, because as you scale and as other institutions adopt it, it could have some repercussions. So select an energy efficient blockchain to do it. Number two, really be mindful of the cost to transact, to mint the NFT, and then also to send it and receive it. That matters a lot. If it costs $100, $200 to mint an NFT, that's really not scalable. It creates a barrier of entry, and it could create problems on the road, especially as you try to undertake the creation of a lot of NFTs. So select a platform that has a lower barrier of entry in terms of transaction costs. And then lastly, look at the long term and look to adopt a platform that scales and evolves over time. And Tezos is a good example of that, because most blockchains will actually split if they try to upgrade. And if they split, then the NFTs end up in two places. That's called a fork, and I won't go into too much detail, but basically, if you're into this for the long haul, you need a platform that can adjust and evolve and upgrade without the splitting and the inefficiencies that come with that. So select a platform that's energy efficient, low transaction cost, and actually has a governance process to upgrade.
So throughout this conversation, we've mentioned a fair few tools that are already readily available to use, those that are currently under development, and a lot of advice on how to actually engage with these tools and what to be wary of. So Diane, Mark, thank you so much, and obviously thank you to the audience for joining us. And we'll be back in about half an hour with our next talk.